I still remember the moment perfectly. My sister Megan stood there in her ivory dress, radiant under the fairy lights of the Tennessee barn venue, while my mother beamed with pride from the front row. The photographer captured them embracing, my mother's eyes glistening with tears of joy. Then came the reception. The bourbon flowed, country music played, and relatives I hadn't seen in years descended upon me like clockwork. Aunt Diane was first, champagne flute in hand, lipstick slightly smudged. "Honey, what a beautiful wedding. When will it be your turn?" Uncle Rob followed. "35 and still flying solo? Clock's ticking, sweetheart." Then my mother, glowing from the perfect day, sidled up beside me at the bar. She squeezed my arm, that familiar pressure that conveyed both affection and disappointment. "Your sister's wedding was stunning, wasn't it? Did you see how I couldn't stop smiling?" She paused, swirling her drink. "When will it be you, Carolyn?" I stayed silent, the weight of what they didn't know pressing against my chest. If they only knew what I'd been hiding all these years, what I'd accomplished despite them, tonight wouldn't end the way any of them expected. Growing up in suburban Cincinnati, our family looked picture perfect from the outside. Dad's accounting firm provided well, Mom volunteered at church, and our colonial-style home hosted legendary 4th of July barbecues. But inside those walls, success was measured in milestones that followed a strict Midwestern timeline. College degree by 22, career by 24, marriage by 28, kids by 30. My sister Megan hit every mark with precision. I was always the outlier. "Carolyn just marches to her own drummer," my mother would tell her book club ladies, the same way you'd describe an eccentric aunt, with forced affection masking disappointment. What she really meant was, "Carolyn can't seem to get it right." I remember my high school graduation party. Mom had invited the entire neighborhood and half the congregation from First Presbyterian. As relatives mingled around our backyard pool, drinking sweet tea and eating pulled pork sandwiches, my mother clinked her glass for attention. "We're so proud to announce that Megan has been promoted to junior partner at her law firm," she declared, beaming at my sister, "and she and David have put a down payment on that beautiful colonial in Hyde Park." The crowd erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "Way to go, Megan." Then Mom turned to me, the actual graduate, "And Carolyn will be attending state in the fall. We're hoping she finds her direction there." Her smile tightened as she added, "Maybe she'll meet a nice boy in one of those creative classes she's taking." The party continued while I stood frozen, my diploma suddenly feeling worthless in my hands. Then came Thanksgiving when I was 26. I'd flown back from New York, where I'd been struggling to establish myself as a graphic designer. The economy had tanked, and I was barely making rent by bartending in Brooklyn. "Carolyn, darling," my mother said, loudly enough for everyone around the dining table to hear, "David's firm is hiring administrative assistants. Wouldn't that be perfect for you until you figure things out? Benefits and everything." She passed the cranberry sauce, adding, "You could move back home, save some money. That artsy stuff in New York is just so unstable." Dad nodded in agreement while cutting his turkey. No shame in coming home, pumpkin. What they didn't know was that I had just landed my first major client, a small tech startup that couldn't pay much but believed in my vision. I'd spent months developing their brand identity, working through nights and weekends. But rather than tell them and face their inevitable dismissal of my achievement, I simply nodded and asked someone to pass the gravy. The grand gesture began after my 30th birthday. Mom started a wedding fund for me, without telling me first. She mentioned it casually during a Sunday phone call. "I've set aside $25,000 for whenever you're ready, Carolyn. It's been growing interest for 5 years now," she said proudly, as if she'd solved all my problems. "I know you haven't found the right man yet, but when you do, I don't want money to be an issue for the wedding. Nothing extravagant like Megan's, of course, but still something respectable." What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been channeling every spare dollar I had into something entirely different. While they thought I was still struggling as a freelancer, taking odd design jobs and living in a shabby Brooklyn walk-up, I had actually founded my own digital branding agency. Starting with that first tech client, I had slowly built a roster of innovative companies who valued my unconventional approach. And 3 months before Megan's wedding, I had signed the paperwork to acquire my largest competitor, a 7-figure deal that would merge our companies and establish me as one of the leading creative directors in the industry. The announcement was embargoed until the contracts cleared, exactly 1 week after my sister's wedding. This was my secret, the truth that sat heavy in my chest as I watched my mother beam at Megan's perfect wedding, while wondering aloud when I would finally get my life together. The morning of Megan's wedding dawned with Cincinnati's signature humid summer heat. I'd flown in 3 days early to help with final preparations, though help mostly meant being dispatched on endless errands, while my opinions were politely acknowledged, then promptly ignored. "Carolyn, the florist called. They're delivering ranunculus instead of peonies. Can you handle it? You've always been good with creative adjustments," Mom said, not looking up from her checklist at the kitchen island. "And maybe wear something with sleeves when you go. Mrs. Peterson from church works there on Saturdays." The implication was clear. Cover the tattoo on my shoulder, the constellation design I'd gotten to mark landing my first major client. It was tasteful, artistic even, but in my mother's world, it represented another way I'd gone off course. I spent the rehearsal dinner seated at the singles table with Megan's husband's college roommate who talked exclusively about CrossFit, and my 14-year-old second cousin who spent the evening texting under the table. Mom had orchestrated the seating chart, naturally. "Isn't Tyler nice?" she whispered when I went to the bar. "He's in finance, very stable." "He asked if I've tried bone broth fasting, Mom." She patted my arm. "At least he's health conscious. That's important when you're thinking about children." My phone buzzed. A text from my business partner Aisha in New York. "Final paperwork just arrived from the lawyers. We're officially closing the deal Tuesday. The Wall Street Journal wants an exclusive." I quickly tucked my phone away as Mom peered over my shoulder. "Work emergency?" she asked, her tone suggesting that whatever creative emergency I might be handling couldn't possibly compare to the importance of Megan's wedding weekend. "Something like that," I replied. "Well, you should really consider a career with more structure, honey. All this freelancing, it's not sustainable. How will you ever afford a home or support a family?" I took a large sip of bourbon. "I manage, Ma." The wedding day arrived with military precision. The bridal party gathered in the farmhouse adjacent to the rustic chic barn venue that Megan had selected. "It's authentic country without being tacky," she'd explained. As I helped Megan with her veil, she squeezed my hand. "Thanks for being here, Caro. I know Mom's been, well, Mom." For a moment, I considered telling her everything. About the acquisition, about the feature the Wall Street Journal was planning, about how on Tuesday I would become the CEO of a company valued at 8 figures. But then her bridesmaids rushed in with mimosas, and the moment passed. During photographs, my mother positioned me strategically behind my cousin. "You're taller, Carolyn. It balances the frame," ensuring my navy blue bridesmaid dress, selected to minimize my figure, as Mom had helpfully suggested during fittings, was barely visible in the family portraits. The ceremony went flawlessly. David teared up as Megan walked down the aisle to an acoustic version of Tennessee Whiskey. They exchanged personalized vows that referenced their first date at a Cincinnati Reds game and their shared love of their golden retriever. Mom sobbed in the front row while Dad stoically handed her monogrammed handkerchiefs. It was during the reception that things began to unravel. The DJ announced the mother-daughter dance, and I watched from the bar as Mom and Megan swayed to Wind Beneath My Wings. When it ended, Mom wiped away tears and spoke into the microphone. "I just want to say how proud we are of Megan and David. Watching you build your beautiful life together, the house in the right neighborhood, both with such impressive careers, and now this perfect day. It's everything a mother dreams of." She turned, catching my eye at the bar. "And Carolyn, honey, your turn will come too. Sometimes the late bloomers just need a little extra time." Polite laughter rippled through the room. I felt heat rise in my cheeks as heads turned toward me. Then Uncle Bob materialized beside me, bourbon in hand. "So, what are you doing these days? Still with the drawing and computer stuff?" "I run a digital branding agency," I said flatly. "That's nice. Is that like making websites?" "My grandson does that for his school projects," he chuckled. "But it's not too late, you know? My buddy's son is divorced, good Midwestern guy, owns a successful HVAC business, very practical career." As I opened my mouth to respond, my phone lit up with a notification. The Wall Street Journal reporter had sent a preview of Tuesday's headline: "Rising star Carolyn Mitchell disrupts branding industry with groundbreaking acquisition." Uncle Bob peered at my screen. "What's that about?" Before I could answer, my mother appeared, champagne in hand. "Carolyn, come mingle. David's cousin is a doctor and just moved to Cincinnati. Divorced, no kids, perfect situation." She glanced down at my phone, catching a glimpse of the email. "Work again? Honestly, Carolyn, it's your sister's wedding. Whatever logo you're designing can wait until Monday." Something inside me snapped. Years of diminishment, of being the family's cautionary tale, of having my life's work reduced to a hobby, it all crystallized in that moment. "It's not a logo, Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "It's the Wall Street Journal." She blinked, confused. "Why would Babe be emailing you?" The DJ's voice boomed through the speakers. "And now, let's hear from the mother of the bride, who has a few words to share about our beautiful couple." Mom's face lit up. She squeezed my arm one last time. "We'll talk about your little project later, honey. Duty calls." As she walked toward the microphone, the room erupting in applause, I knew exactly what was coming. Another public reminder of what success should look like. Another comparison I would inevitably fail. I drained my bourbon and made my decision. My mother took the microphone, her voice slightly tremulous with emotion and champagne. The barn fell silent as golden light streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced above the rustic farm tables. "When Megan was little," Mom began, "she used to line up her dolls and play wedding. She always knew exactly what she wanted: the dress, the flowers, the perfect husband." She gestured toward David, who smiled on cue. "And look at her now, everything falling into place exactly as it should." The crowd murmured appreciatively. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Some of us are blessed with children who follow the path laid out for them," she continued. "And some of us," her eyes found me at the back of the room, "are blessed with children who take the scenic route." More knowing laughter rippled through the crowd. I felt my chest tighten. But today is about Megan and David, who have done everything right. The careers, the house and Hyde Park, and now this beautiful wedding. And someday soon, God willing, beautiful grandchildren. She raised her glass. "To Megan and David for making a mother's dreams come true." The room erupted in applause and cheers. Glasses clanked. And something in me, something I'd kept tamped down for years, finally broke free. I don't remember walking to the front of the room. I only remember suddenly being there, beside my mother, who looked startled but quickly recovered, plastering on her social smile. "Oh, Carolyn wants to toast her sister too. How sweet." She tried to hand me the microphone, but I didn't take it. "Actually, I have something to say," I said, loud enough that the front tables fell silent. The DJ, reading the room, lowered the music. Mom's smile faltered. "Honey, maybe now's not the time for one of your creative expressions." I gently took the microphone from her hand. The room was watching now, curious. Megan looked concerned from her seat at the head table. I've been told my whole life that success looks one way, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. College, career, marriage, house in the right zip code, kids on the right schedule. My mother's smile was frozen in place, eyes darting around the room. And for years, I've let you all believe I was failing because my life didn't follow that path. I've sat through every family dinner, every holiday, every birthday being asked when I would get my act together, when I would stop playing at my career and get a real job, when I would find a man to take care of me, when I would stop being the family disappointment. Mom reached for the microphone, but I stepped away. What none of you know, what I've never told you because you never actually asked, is that on Tuesday, the Wall Street Journal is announcing that I've acquired my largest competitor. The company I built from nothing will now be valued at $12 million. I'm not the failure you think I am. I'm the CDO of one of the fastest growing digital branding agencies in the country. The silence in the barn was absolute. I could hear the fairy lights buzzing overhead. And that wedding fund you started for me, Mom? The one you mention every time we speak? You can keep it. I don't need it. In fact, I reached into my clutch and pulled out a check I'd written that morning. Here's $25,000 for Megan and David. Consider it my wedding gift. I placed the check on the head table. Megan's mouth hung open. I'm not sharing this to hurt you or to take away from Megan's day, I continued, looking directly at my sister. I'm sharing it because I'm done being the family cautionary tale. I'm done having my life reduced to what it isn't rather than celebrated for what it is. I handed the microphone back to the stunned DJ. Congratulations, Megan and David. I truly wish you every happiness. And then I walked out, past the gaping faces of relatives, past Uncle Bob and his bourbon, past the wedding planner frantically whispering into her headset, and out into the warm Cincinnati evening. Behind me, I heard the barn erupt into chaos. My father calling my name, the DJ desperately trying to restart the music, and cutting through it all, my mother's voice, high and strained. Carolyn Elizabeth Mitchell, you come back here right now. But I kept walking, each step feeling lighter than the last, out to the gravel parking lot where fireflies were just beginning to emerge in the twilight. I took a deep breath of humid Ohio air, the air of my childhood, the air I'd been so desperate to escape, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel suffocating. My phone buzzed, a text from Aisha. WSJ editor loves the story, says you're disrupting more than just the industry. And then, unexpectedly, a text from Megan. Holy shit, Caro, we need to talk, but also, I'm proud of you. As I slid into my rental car, I caught a glimpse of my mother hurrying out of the barn, her carefully coiffed hair coming undone, her expression a mix of fury and something I'd never seen before, uncertainty. For a moment, our eyes met across the parking lot, and for the first time in my adult life, she was the one who looked away first. The aftermath was exactly as chaotic as you might expect when you drop a truth bomb at a Midwestern wedding reception. I drove straight to the Cincinnati Marriott downtown instead of back to my parents' house. By midnight, my phone had 27 missed calls, 12 from Mom, 8 from Dad, 5 from Megan, and various others from extended family members suddenly interested in my internet business. I turned it off and ordered room service. Around 1 a.m., there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Megan standing there, still in her wedding dress, though she'd swapped her heels for white Converse. "Nice exit," she said, pushing past me into the room. Mom's having palpitations. Dad's drinking scotch in the garage. "I'm sorry if I ruined your reception," I said, meaning it. She snorted, collapsing onto the king-sized bed. "Are you kidding? That was the most exciting thing to happen at a Mitchell family function since Grandpa Fred showed up to Thanksgiving with his 28-year-old girlfriend." She sat up suddenly. $12 million? For real? I nodded. "Holy shit, Caro." She shook her head. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" That question hung in the air between us. Why hadn't I told my own sister? The person who'd shared a bathroom with me for 18 years, who knew I slept with a nightlight until I was 12, who'd taught me how to French braid and shotgun a beer. I think I got used to being the family disappointment, I said finally. It became my identity. And then when things started going well, it was like, if I told you all and you still didn't think it was good enough, then what? At least this way, I knew why I wasn't measuring up. Megan was quiet for a long moment. I never thought you were a disappointment, she said finally. I always thought you were brave. Going to New York, building something from nothing. I was jealous, actually. Jealous? Of me? I couldn't hide my disbelief. You're the golden child, the one who did everything right. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I did everything expected. That's different. She twisted her new wedding ring absently. Do you know why David and I bought that house in Hyde Park? Because Mom found it. She drove us there, told us it was perfect for starting a family, and had the realtor's card ready. She looked up at me. Sometimes I wonder what we would have chosen if we'd been making our own choices. We talked until dawn, really talked, in a way we hadn't since we were teenagers. About her doubts about corporate law, about my struggles building my business, about the weight of expectations and the courage it takes to defy them. As the sun rose over the Ohio River, she hugged me tightly. I'm sorry I didn't see you, Caro. Really see you. Me too, I whispered back. The next day brought a text from my father asking to meet for coffee. We sat at a corner table at Sidewinder, the hipster coffee shop I'd always loved, but that my parents had always dismissed as pretentious. Your mother's not ready to talk, he said, after we'd settled in with our drinks. He looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. I figured. He stirred his coffee methodically. 12 million, huh? I nodded. And this is computers? Websites? Digital branding. We help companies develop their visual identity across platforms, create cohesive messaging strategies, and I stopped, seeing his eyes glaze over. Yeah, basically websites and logos. He nodded, then surprised me by asking, do you have pictures of your work? So I showed him my portfolio on my iPad, projects for tech startups, fashion brands, even a well-known bourbon distillery that made him raise his eyebrows in recognition. He asked questions, real ones, about how I'd built the business, about my team, about my plans for the merged companies. I don't understand half of what you do, he admitted finally, but it sounds like you're good at it, really good. Coming from my father, who measured success in billable hours and retirement contributions, it felt monumental. As we were leaving, he hesitated, then said, that wedding fund, your mother started it because she was worried about you. We both were. We thought you were struggling, and we wanted, I don't know, a safety net for you. I know, Dad. We should have asked about what you were actually doing. We should have asked. The Wall Street Journal article ran on Tuesday as planned. By Wednesday, it had been picked up by several industry publications and even made a brief appearance on CNBC. My inbox flooded with congratulatory messages from clients, colleagues, and suddenly long-lost relatives who always knew I had potential. Megan texted from her honeymoon in Maui, "You're trending on LinkedIn. David says his firm might need rebranding." I told him family discount is still full price. A week later, I was back in New York, in our newly extended office in Chelsea, when my assistant said I had a visitor. I looked up to see my mother standing awkwardly by the reception desk, clutching her Dooney and Burke purse like a shield. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I can go if you're too busy," she said, glancing around at the open concept office with its exposed brick walls and staff in creative casual attire. I wanted to see it, your business." I gave her a tour, showed her our design studio, introduced her to my team, walked her through our client portfolio. She nodded and smiled politely, clearly out of her element, but trying. Finally, we sat in my corner office overlooking the Manhattan skyline. "It's very modern," she said finally. "Very you." "Thanks, I think." She fidgeted with her purse clasp. I read the article in the Wall Street Journal. Your father printed it out for me. I waited. $12 million, she said, shaking her head. And all this time, we thought that I was failing, I supplied. She flinched. That you were struggling. There's a difference. Is there? We worried about you, Carolyn. All those years in that tiny Brooklyn apartment, never coming home for Christmas because you couldn't afford the flight. We thought you needed help. I didn't come home because I was working, I said quietly, building this. And every time I did come home, I left feeling worse about myself. She was silent for a long moment. I always thought my job was to help you find the right path, she said finally. I never considered that you were already on it. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was an acknowledgement. From my mother, that was seismic. About the wedding fund, she started. Keep it, I said, or use it for something else. Maybe a trip? You and Dad never took that Alaska cruise you talked about. A few months later, a strange thing happened. My mother called me, not to ask when I was coming home or to tell me about some eligible bachelor she'd met at church, but to ask for my professional opinion. Her women's auxiliary was updating their website and newsletter, and she wondered if I might recommend someone. Someone good, she specified. Like you. I connected her with one of our junior designers, and when she insisted on paying full rate, I realized it was her way of acknowledging the value of what I do. It wasn't everything, but it was something. The unexpected twist came 6 months after Megan's wedding. She and David invited me to dinner during my visit home for Christmas. They'd sold the Hyde Park house, they announced. David was leaving his firm to start his own practice, focusing on immigration law, something he'd always been passionate about but had set aside for the practical path. Megan was taking a sabbatical from corporate law to work with a nonprofit providing legal aid to women in poverty. Your speech at the wedding, David admitted, it got us thinking about what success really looks like, about making our own choices. Mom wasn't thrilled about their decision. Such promising careers, and that house had the perfect nursery space. But she was trying, in her way, to understand. As for the $25,000 check I dramatically presented at the wedding, Megan never cashed it. Instead, we used it to start a small foundation providing grants to young women entrepreneurs from the Midwest. We named it after our grandmother, who'd secretly painted beautiful watercolors her whole life, but never showed them to anyone until after she died. Looking back now, 2 years after that wedding, I realized that what happened wasn't just about proving my worth or silencing my critics. It was about reclaiming my story. For too long, I'd allowed myself to be defined by what I wasn't. Not married, not settled, not following the prescribed path. But in that moment of standing up at Megan's wedding, I finally defined myself by what I am. Successful on my own terms, brave enough to forge my own way, complete without the checkboxes others wanted me to tick. My relationship with my mother is still complicated. We may never fully understand each other's definitions of success, but we're learning to respect them. She's even visited the office twice more, and last month actually used the word impressive to describe our new client acquisition. The truth is, families are messy. We hurt each other in the specific ways only people who love us can. But we also have the capacity to grow, to see each other with fresh eyes, to write new chapters in our shared story. If you're holding on to a secret success, afraid it won't measure up in someone else's eyes, maybe it's time to own it. Your path doesn't need anyone else's validation to be worthy. And sometimes, speaking your truth doesn't just free you, it might free others around you too. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. We all have our own weddings to walk out of, metaphorically speaking, and our own truths to finally speak aloud. What's yours?